see if we can get rolling. Okay, so we're gonna give it a minute or two. I should have said like we should do some danza before before we get started. We could do viernes en movimiento.
For real.
It doesn't have the same ring though. In. Hola, hola. I know it's Friday. People are getting off of work, taking the time to be here today. I'm super excited for our conversation. It wasn't that long ago that you and I had like a private conversation on a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So I'm super excited because at the time I was like, I wish that this was like, heard, you know? I mean, there was like a lot of chisme though, so maybe not all of it.
There is a lot of good chisme too.
A lot of really good chisme back then. All right, so we have people coming in. Chris is going to do our intros, and then we'll get into the conversation. Hold on one second. Sorry, y'all, we're doing a little bit of techie. Carissa, do you think if I stop the recording and then select to record on the cloud, that it might let you record on the device?
Let's try that.
Okay.
Because it's not giving me an option. I see that we see everyone recording, like the Spanish interpreters, but it's not allowing me to hit record on my end.
That's weird. It's already recording. It told me that it's already recording to the cloud.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We've like been trying to figure this out, y'all, for months now. Like, how do we record the Spanish interpretation to go with the plática so that the recording is not separate from the video, you know? But okay. All right. So Lorenia is going to just try to record the audio interpretation. So I think we just get started because we only have an hour.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I had a different device, so I'm closing that off. All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Let's just take a moment to take a deep breath and like be present in our bodies here. It's 5 o'clock or another time if you're elsewhere, acknowledging that we are in Ahakamin, Tongva aka Orange County. Some of us, Leslie and I. So yes, taking a deep breath, closing your eyes if that feels good. Setting aside all these techie things, because all these buttons and things. So I am Carissa, and I will be moderating this conversation. If you are logged in here, then you are to our very first Latinx Parenting LGBTQ Familias series. It is a community series to highlight and amplify the voices and stories of parents that identify as LGBTQ, parents raising LGBTQ children, or former, as in this case today, former Latinx children who identify as LGBTQ, who are committed to decolonizing their parenting or their own reparenting. That's the theme of today. And I am the Community Partnership Coordinator for Latinx Parenting. I have been on the team officially for a few months, since February or so, since March. And here I am. I'm super excited to be part of the team. And so any community developments or partnerships, that's what I do for the team. And there is an interpretation channel. It's the part the reason for the technical difficulties was to figure out how we can make sure that we record our Spanish interpretation so that the recording is available also in Spanish. So if you need interpretation, there is a channel where you click Español and you can hear the interpretation live there. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions throughout the whole conversation, please put them in the Q&A option, the webinar Q&A option, as opposed to the chat. The chat can sometimes get too long. I will be watching the chat and chiming in there as well. But if you have a question, we want to make sure we answer in the last 15 to 20 minutes of this conversation. If it's in the Q&A, we can make sure that we address it there. We may not get to all of them, but we will do our best to get to all of them. If we experience any technical difficulties, which has been the case in our previous conversation sometimes, stay on or hop back on with the same link. We do our best to stay on. Sometimes we've had our guests experience Wi-Fi or technical issues. We'll continue the conversation until our guest can get back on. So on to our esteemed jefa, welcoming our jefa, Leslie Priscilla. She is the Chicana Madre, parent coach, Latinx parenting founder. She's a first-generation non-Black Chicana. Raumuri lineage, is a mother to 3 biracial children, 4 including Latinx parenting, a certified parent coach with over 13 years of experience. She shares her medicine by offering coaching, workshop support, and advocacy for Latinx, Chicanx families locally, nationally, and internationally via this baby Latinx parenting. Leslie's vision is of a movement rooted in children's rights, social and racial justice, the individual and collective practice of nonviolence and reparenting, intergenerational and ancestral healing, cultural sustenance, and the active decolonization of oppressive practices in our families towards liberation. All those words. It's like a tongue twister almost.
Yes.
And introducing our very special guest, Jose Richard Aviles. Thank you so much for being here. Jose is a multimedia artist, urban planner, social worker based out of Los Angeles. As a former organizer and current artist, Aviles is interested in the intersections between space and justice, laughter and resistance, and the magic of the stage. Currently, Aviles is promoting their first published collection of poems, Semilla and Developing. Oh, Semilla. I thought there was like another, it's cut off there. Semilla, collection of poems, Semilla, and developing a new poetry EP, La Carta que Nunca Envié, an homage to Juan Gabriel and the countless lovers that are hidden in the lyrics. Welcome to the stage, Jose, and I'm so excited for this conversation between you and Leslie.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited
too. And can I just say that my next tatuaje is going to be Juanga? Like we're already in the process of designing my next Juanga tattoo because I feel like Juanga is like my third parent, right? And like you probably feel this way too. It's just like, that's just who we grew up with. Like there was never a weekend where we did not listen to Juan Gabriel. And so I didn't even know that about you, but it makes sense why I like feel so connected to you because we
yeah, I'm excited about this little project. It's wild, but you know, I'm like doing covers and poetry and to boleros. It's a whole thing.
Yes, I'm so excited. You recently had a quinceañera also.
Yeah, the Semilla Quinceañera. Oh my God, that was a lot of fun. And
Yes.
then I just came back from Mexico City.
Goodness.
And I've always had a dream of doing a full evening length work. And, you know, usually that's about an hour to an hour and a half show.
Mhm.
And I think it's what we dream of as artists, you know, the musician in the album, the filmmaker in the feature film, and, you know, me and whatever it is that I do, one person show. And in Mexico City, I was supposed to do a 40-minute set. And I got a little, I think it's perfect for the conversation. And I got a little insecure and I thought I didn't have enough for a 40 minutes. And I was like, do I even have enough work do I trust myself to have enough work? And then I just did what I did, and I added some last minute poems in there. And then, I was like, let me just do a Q&A after,
Yeah.
and we fill in an hour so folks feel like they came in to get an experience worth their time. And
Mhm.
so after I finished the performance, I was like, okay, y'all, I think there's still time for a Q&A. Like, how long did the piece run? And they were like, an hour and a half, Nalgona. And I was like, what? What? I literally, this is the most wildest thing that's ever happened to me, but I literally made my dream come true without knowing. And I was like, and the show is completely in Spanish. So I translated all of my poems. My poems are bilingual, 80% of them in English and 20% of them in Spanish. But for this, I was like, no, I'm in Mexico. So I translated the entire work, and the entire thing is in Spanish. And then I discovered I'm now like literally a bilingual artist where my work is so different in English than it is in Spanish. And it was wild. And so Colonia Juárez me dio las pataditas de la suerte.
Oh my, did you visit El Noa Noa?
Yeah, though I've been to the one here. Listen, I was talking to some folks, and we're trying to see if I can hook up with Luis to do the show here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so
Si
stay
estás,
tuned.
si
We're
estás
like
viendo.
starting, we're like starting at the end.
Right.
But I'm so excited to have you here. And I just feel like when I found out about you, I was like immediately just so like gravitating towards you. And I was like, who is this person? And then I realized like you knew some of the same people that I knew. And so since then I'm just like one of your greatest fans. Pero I'm so curious about your story. We've had conversations before, but I'm so curious about your story, specifically around your identity as a queer Nalgona and also a titi to your nephew, because that's something that we had talked about a lot, just the intersections of our work, not even just our work, but our personal lives, right? And just what we envision, the vision that we have for children, et cetera. And so tell us a little bit more about your story. What was it like growing up as you, as Jose Richard in your familia? When did you know that you were maybe not like what niños are supposed to be or whatever?
Yeah.
And I just want to hear, your story.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm the oldest, so already there, I came into this world with a lot of expectations and a lot of
Yes.
pressures, especially as a child of immigrants, right? And you're the oldest. I think the oldest, the first American citizen in a family becomes the salvation of a family,
Yes.
and having to carry that pressure has been a journey that I've had to learn how to deconstruct, how to I recently confessed to someone that I have a crush on that sometimes I wish I wasn't the oldest, that I
Mhm.
never wanted this pressure, that I wasn't meant to be in my family. And that's not the case, right? And so here I am now. But I think to that, to what you asked me, I always say, and I wrote this in a poem called ¿cómo se llama? A Love So Good. Es que el amor en español se llama Simple y Profundo.
Mhm.
Pero Love So Good, and they talk about that. I for me, like my queerness lives in my left hand
Yeah.
because I'm left-handed. So my logic when I was younger was like, okay, cool. Like most people are right-handed, but some of us are blessed being left-handed, but we all write at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
I thought most boys like girls, but some of us like boys, but at the end of the day, we're all boys.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that wasn't sort of the reality of the world. But in the third grade, I asked a boy to be my crush. I mean, my Valentine. And I just didn't know that that's not how the world functioned. And so I always say that my queerness lives in my left hand. It's a book waiting to be written. Um,
Mhm.
and so all of those things, right? And I think I've always known since a young age. I mean, this is just who I am. And, I
Yeah.
was definitely a latchkey kid. Definitely had, babysitters. My mom worked. There were moments where I think I had a couple performances, even in an elementary school that, my mom never attended to because she was working. My father was working. So even now as an artist, I feel like there's been moments in my life where I felt some resentment of my mom not being there, or I
Mhm.
don't invite her to things. And it's like, well, I just got so used to my mom not being there. So I feel like that's something that I've grown up with, unpacked and deconstructed. And sometimes I'm like, another thing is like, we don't need to dissect trauma so much to be surviving. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
know that it's a part of my trauma, but I don't need to be dissecting it all the time. So
Yes.
there's never a moment where I feel like I don't have to invite my mom to my art, and that's fine. I'm
Yes.
not triggered. I'm healthy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
still thriving. So it's okay. So a couple of those things, but I do remember, and I shared this story once, but my mom once saw me rolling around on the floor to Shakira's Piezas Calzos Sueños Blancos. Love
Yes.
Shakira. Old school Shakira. I don't know this
I
Shakira.
think she's in here. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, I don't know the one that's, I don't know, whenever, wherever. I'm like, it's called Suerte.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
but and she was like, ¿Qué estás haciendo? Y yo, bailando.
Yes.
Mom was like, you're dumb. Like, what? That's not dance. And then literally, like in undergrad, maybe it might have been my junior year of undergrad. I busted out laughing in the middle of class, in the middle of warm up. And my professor is like, what are you laughing about? And I told her this story. And I was like, oh shit, if my mom would see me now that I'm getting all this debt just to roll around on the floor, because every modern dance class always starts on the floor and you
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
floor exercises. And I was like, oh my God, like that's hilarious. I never planned this, but as a child, I knew I was meant to be an artist. I've always known that. Um,
Beautiful.
you know, and to the relation to what you asked about my nephew. So the funny thing is, like, I remember I told you about Titi.
Mhm,
Um, and to me, that being my sort of gender neutral way of being referred to, I'm not a tío, I'm not a tía, I'm
mhm,
Titi.
mhm.
But the lesson, right? Children are always teaching us everything. My nephew doesn't call me Titi. My nephew has a word, can say tía, but he can't say tío. So what he says is toti. So Toti became, I was like, Titi was my idea, but Toti is what we've been named. And Toti, and it still works in that gender neutral form. And I
Yes.
was like, this child, what? What? How did you know? And so just, I think about my nephew all the time, and just we one of the conversations that we had was just how children, you know, show us what true freedom can look like.
Mhm,
They cry when they need their needs to be met. They laugh when no one else is laughing, and they scream not caring if anyone would hear them. I mean, in the hopes that someone would, really.
mhm.
But that sort of liberation of expression, somehow society conditioned us to repress all that along the way. And as I'm seeing my nephew, it's like, and he's about to be 2 next month, which is wild.
Mhm.
And just to see them become like a little personality has been interesting. They fallen down the stairs a couple times, and we're just like, oh my God. And the own insecurity of being a guardian, and you're like, oh my God, we failed. And then
Oh.
he just gets up and starts laughing, and you're like, okay, you're fine, okay, we're good, right?
Yeah.
So it's such a fun relationship. I always feel like a child. I wrote a poem about La semilla que nunca soñé, the seed I never dreamed.
Mm,
But it talks a lot about the relationship I have with my mother and the parallels that I now see that my sister have with her child.
mm,
And seeing
mhm.
my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, become a parent and a
Yeah.
mom is wild.
Yeah.
We talked about this, but
Yeah.
learning to set boundaries has been very important for me, to know that, like, I will always be an older sibling. And so, I mean, my sister is my whole life. Like, I, changed her diapers. I, did her hair when we were going to school. I fed her. I helped her change. She's a really good friend now. She's
Yeah.
like, all those different things. And I have to trust that she's also a good mother.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
that's been interesting, right? That boundary of no longer asking questions about parenting, and only ensuring that we're having conversations when she needs to have the conversation versus me chiming in.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, we did talk about this a little bit because I was on the podcast. That was how the conversation began. And then I think you and I stayed for like 2 hours afterwards, just like chismeando and cotorreando. And it was, but that was something that I remember that came up, and how I relate to that. What is, I have a little sister who's 10 years younger than I am. And so she's actually in town right now from New York. She left in New York. And I had to release so many expectations about the ways that I thought that she should be and grow, and the choices that she should make. And I was like, heartbroken. I never shared it with her, but I was heartbroken when she left because I always thought like I want a tia around, like I want her to be a part of my kids' lives daily, if not, por lo menos una vez a la semana, like come and hang out, and like help me while I make dinner or whatever. But she has her own life and she has her own choices. And she has also chosen to not have children. Like she's very, very clear about that choice. Whereas I always knew when I was a child, similar to how like we reflect on our childhood and we're like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense that I grew up this way. Like it makes a lot of sense that I had these three children because I think I said I wanted to have three children when I was like 5. Like I feel like I knew that. And so trusting her, right? Like trusting that she is on her own path, on her own like evolution, in her own unfolding has been a stretch. Like it's been a stretch for me, but also has given me the opportunity to be really present for my children and kind of like have that same like, okay, I've already stretched this muscle of releasing. I've stretched this muscle of letting go. But we do, I mean, you're right. We have so much wisdom as children. And so I think even, I think a lot of what I hear from my friends who identify as queer or LGBTQ is that there's a lot of like friction sometimes with that trusting, with our parents not trusting us, that like we know what's best for us, that we know who we are, that we have our identity. And I think it's so beautiful that you were like that confident about your identity even that young, right? Because I've heard the opposite.
Yeah. I reflect back and I think of it as such a blessing, to have this cognitive dissonance at such a young age
Yeah.
and to literally think, I mean, it's not by accident that I was also born left-handed. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
that I got to be this little oddball in so many different aspects of my identity, whether it is as, as a queer body, as a brown body, as left-handed, like even my personality. Now I understand that my
Mhm.
personality is like, oh, not fool. There's one of you.
Yeah.
And and so now I get to embrace all this. And so, but I think about it now at 30 and it's like, no, this wasn't done by accident. Like
Mhm.
that feeling that I had when I was young, that it's like I'm destined to be an artist and I'm gonna be famous. And now I'm like, I understand that that could be rooted in some arrogance, but that I am destined for greatness and how my life is unfolding. I
Yeah.
know that now. And it's one of those like, what a life.
Yes, I think
I'm
that's
like, I must have been
beautiful.
a hella sufrida in the past 2 lives that the universe was like, okay, Mia, in this life, you're gonna succeed.
Yeah. Well, I'm so curious about like how that happened within the context of your family. Like how did that happen within the context of your family? What were the times that you felt like you were super supported? Because I think that there's going to be families that watch this conversation. They're like, how do I make sure that my child it becomes Richard? Like how can I make sure that they have that level of confidence? And so what I guess like what did you find was nurturing for that? And what things maybe were not as nurturing that maybe you wish were different?
Yeah, you know what? As you're asking this question, I was like thinking through it, and I remember I don't think I knew I grew up poor until I went to college, and then
Mhm.
sort of realized what privilege looked like, and trust funds, and
Yeah,
allowance, and my work study was literally how I got to experience the world, really, and it wasn't a lot in a different state,
yeah,
and I think a lot of the times, when to start, with the pot. Let's start with the not so positive so we can end at the positive. Um, I think that, until this day, right? I think one of the biggest things is that I've been talking to a lot of folks, especially from Mexico, and I was like, one of the biggest phrases that it might be a little triggering to folks, so a little trigger warning, that we hear as a child of immigrants is "a qué vine este país?"
Mhm.
And that is always so inculcado in our minds. And it's always a thing where it's like, our accomplishments are never seen as accomplishments, they're seen as expectations,
Yes.
right? And so I feel that even at 30 I'm still yearning for "and I'm proud of you" from my mom.
Mhm.
And I now know that I may never hear it from her, but I know what it sounds like. I
Yeah.
know what it feels like. I may never hear those actual words, but I've learned to understand their trauma and see beyond their trauma,
Mhm.
not see them as just my parents, but as people who
Yes.
have their own experiences, and say they may never say I'm proud of you, but I know that my dad says I'm proud of you when he's like, oh, I just got a new job, and he will calculate how much I'm getting paid to the hour. And a part of me is like, why are you reducing me to a wage? Like your capitalistic view. And I know this is my dad being engaged in my conversation and happy that I received a new job. But again, he may never know how to say it.
Yeah.
So I've learned to understand those things. And
Yeah.
on a positive note, I will say that because um they have this expectation that as the oldest, I'm the savior of the family, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
My father never said no to a book,
Mm.
and I always was a nerd anyway, so it was perfect. But a lot of the books that I also read were like queer young adult books. And that was my first time in sort of like losing myself. Like I didn't have a room growing up. I think my first room was when I went to college, really.
Yeah.
And I could get lost in the world of the book. And so tenía mi esquinita en el sillón en la sala.
Mhm.
But I was lost in these worlds. So my father never said no to a book. And I think that was a very wonderful thing because I got to really experience different worlds through literature. And then as I
Yeah.
got older, really found myself just attracted to learning in general. So it just made sense. And I'm glad that that was the case. And I will also say that though my parents don't know that they were modeling this, especially my mom, to me, my mom is the sweetest person that I know. She has a magic of her own. And I don't think my mom knows that it's magic. But what I got from my mom is my ability to connect with people. My mom is that person that everyone connects with her. She's always trying to help somebody. Somebody recognizes her, like, ay, Doña Belén, ¿y cómo está? My mom
Mhm.
is the sweetest person ever. And I think seeing her model that with other people, maybe not all the time at home because
Yeah.
of her own projections and
Isn't
how.
that interesting? I feel like we could go on for like so much about that. Like, oh my God, you're like super amable and like, oh, cuando quiera, aquí está su casa, and I'm just like, but you were just kicking me out last night. What about mi casa?
Right, that part. And so, all those things. So I think those are some of the things in my family. It's funny because I have a chismecito for you too that
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense.
Tell me.
Ay, te lo digo. Okay, okay, okay. So I'm thinking about moving to Mexico City. And
Yeah.
there's something that is calling me. I went in
Mhm.
December and fell in love. And I just came back, and
Mhm.
being able to do the show in Spanish, not knowing, I know who I am as a queer brown person in the politics of this country. I
Yes.
don't know who I am as a queer brown person in the politics of Mexico because of their
Mhm.
own race, classism and racism. It's such a different system of oppression. The same one, don't get me wrong, but it
Yeah.
manifests very differently.
Yes.
And it's interesting how much I can critique because at the end of the day, I'm from America. And
Yeah.
so there's this whole like ni de aquí ni de allá, right? But
Yeah.
I don't like that anymore after going to Mexico for two reasons. One, so we don't feel like imposters in a country where we were displaced through colonization or for
Yes.
whatever reason. And second, to not deny the fact that we have privilege being from America.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and we can't escape it. So for me, it's de aquí y de allá because
Mhm.
I have a passing privilege in Mexico as a brown person, and I speak
Mhm.
Spanish very well. That people don't
Mhm.
know I'm not from Mexico, but the
Mhm.
moment I speak English, they're like, "Ay no, hermana, tú de aquí no eres.
Mhm.
Tú eres gringa." Y yo, and so there's something about the tension of these two identities that to me that clash is
Yeah.
is art. And so literally I'm going to Mexico chasing the story. I don't know what it is yet. I don't know if it's a book, if it's a series. I don't know what it is, but I really believe in this. And so yesterday, I just got a new job, so it's kind of I'm figuring out when I'm moving because I don't even know. It's a lot, but and I think I can make it work. I just got to be strategic. But yesterday, I told my parents I'm moving to Mexico City, and
Big deal.
yeah, my mom is pissed.
Yeah.
My mom is pissed and she's like, I don't know why you're leaving. Like, you're an American citizen. I was like, girl, ain't nobody taking away my citizenship. If anything, I'm getting dual nationality, fool. And so, all those different things came up.
Mhm.
And I realized that my mom is just saying, I'm going to miss you. I'm worried about you. There's all these misconceptions of what Mexico looks like as a country, right? Again, not denying that there's not oppression happening in Mexico and that there's a lot of violence happening in Mexico. I recognize all those things. But, I think my mom sort of like brainwash of American propaganda of what
Yeah.
Mexico is, it's making her very fearful. And I
Yeah.
understood that. And I'm like, Mom, you're what you're saying right now is that you're gonna miss me and you don't know how to articulate it, so you're mad. And I think to me, this next part was the biggest thing. And I was like, look, I didn't come here to ask you for permission. I'm telling you that this is what I need and this is what I am doing. We have 6 months. I love you and let's spend time together. But I am moving.
Yeah.
And that was that moment where I was like, I felt like such an adult where I was like, that I literally felt like I had like that autonomy. Cause parents, right? That I'm like, I'm not asking for permission, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, stop. This is my life. And the most interesting thing is that my father was supportive. My father was like, you know what? You're fucking old. You're old. I don't know what you're doing in Mexico, but if you want to go to Mexico, be very careful. He was like, don't tell anybody that you're working in the US and living in Mexico. Don't trust anybody. Like,
Mhm.
you go do what you need to do and just be careful. And I was like, what?
¿Quién
Thi-
eres? Like, who replaced you?
I literally was like, this is the first time in my life that my father has been so supportive.
Good.
But I think speaking to this whole autonomy thing, right? I
Yeah.
think as queer bodies, we spend an entire life self-determining and self-creating ourselves at all phases of our life. That
Yeah.
you then begin to become sort of this autonomous person, even in your family dynamic, where it's like, like no, like I've lived through a lot and I've survived a lot. One, I'll be fine, and I'm not dumb. Also, you do know that I am a lengua suelta, so thank you for reminding me to not trust everybody. That's real. And second, I'm just not asking for permission. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that to me was such a big step where it was like, I mean, I'm leaving.
That's so liberating, like even just saying it, right? Like, and I just like think about my sister having to tell my mom that she was moving to New York and like how much grief that was for my mom, right? Because it's your like we'll always be their babies, like digan lo que digan. There's all the shit that happened when we were children. Like they don't want us to move that far away from them.
Yeah.
Like that's just real. And I'm like thinking about your sister too, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Toti is gonna move. Like no.
Yeah.
But that's me like putting myself in her position too. But I'm so happy for you.
And it's probably also going to help with the whole boundary setting, right?
Yeah,
That we were talking about. And because one of the things that came up in our previous conversation, right, it's sort of this thing that this may be the closest I've ever come to being a parent.
yeah.
Having a nephew and being there, but also knowing that my nephew has two parents and grandparents and totis, right?
Mhm,
So that's the other funny thing, that there's me and my two brothers. So my
mhm.
sibling calls all three of us totis. There's like
Yeah,
toti
that's
one,
so
two,
cute.
three. But so when we're all together, my nephew says toti. We're just like, he's talking to you." So that's funny.
Yeah,
But and maybe that's the lesson that I need to leave to know how to
I
live
was just gonna
with
say,
this boundary.
I was like, and then there's this part of me that's just like, we, I think all of us owe it to our descendants and the world and our environment to just become like the best and fullest version of ourselves, right? And like set that example for everybody who's coming up. Because like, if I don't live my life, then what am I teaching my children? That like you're gonna not live your life in order to please everybody else?
Yeah, and you know what? But I could talk forever about Mexico City because there was so much magic.
Mm,
So much magic. Like, I can't even explain it. Like, one of my really good friends from here, I knew she was going to Mexico. We had talked about it. I was like, girl, I have a performance. She's like, I'm coming to the performance. So we had talked about it. And I was staying in Colonia Roma Norte. We never talked about where we were staying. We just knew we were in Mexico. And I'm coming out of the Airbnb on my way to Coyacan to this performance, and all I hear behind me is "Malinche eres tú, cabrona," and I was like, "What?" And it's my fucking friend with her family coming out of the Airbnb, and I was like, "What are you doing here?" She's
Oh
like,
my
"Girl, I'm staying here." I was like, "Wait, what?" I was like, "What apartment are you in?" She's like, "I'm in 805." I was like, "I'm in 804." We
stop.
literally Yeah, we literally were vecinas for the week that she was there.
Oh my
That
gosh.
and I was like,
That's like God right there, right? Like if we can define if we can define like the magic of the universe, like that's it.
that's it. And there were so many other magical moments, like with my little crush and everything. They're interesting. They called me out. And if nothing comes to fruition, I've learned already a lot in these 2 weeks that I got to spend time with him. So and
Mhm.
I'm just like, if this isn't magic, I don't know what else is. And it continues. I had like some situation with my degrees from school. I hadn't received them yet. I was in the Uber already here in LA. Like I literally pulled up to my house and I was like, you know what? Let me, if I'm thinking about leaving, let me like wrap this up and figure out what the hell's going on and get it done. Girl, my degrees were in the mail. And I was like, wait, what? What just happened? And then, on Tuesday, I get the job offer that will possibly allow me to be remote. I'm finding out how to make it work. So, again, this move to Mexico just keeps coming and keeps coming and it keeps calling me. And I'm like, what is going on? I have no idea what the universe is conspiring. I believe in colibris and seeing them, but there's always a little bit of skepticism with me because there's a beautiful garden in my front yard. So I'm like, right, exactly. Tengo lo mío. I
Mm.
know.
Oh
I
my
live in. I live in a. There's a beautiful garden in my front yard, so I'm like, but I flores. But
yeah.
literally the day of the performance, one showed up in front of me outside of my Airbnb, and I was like, oh no, sí es magia, sí, sí,
I'm gonna ask you something that was not on the list of questions, but
of
like I
course.
think that we're talking about and like everything that I am experiencing, porque yo también recibo esos tipos de señas, right? Like I also see the signs and I'm like, we're listening, right? Like we're tuning into like whatever messages from my ancestors are trying to come in. Like you're describing this move as like getting pulled, right? Like you're getting pulled in this direction. And so my question has always been like, how do I nurture that? Like, how do I nurture that in my bruja children? Like, because I already know that they already have those same senses, those same sensations. But I think the world, I think the world is very successful at making children believe that they don't have that kind of power.
Yeah, hmm, okay, this is gonna be a hard one because I had a conversation with the crush, and I was like, sometimes I reconcile with the fact I have to reconcile with my family is everything I don't believe in.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was telling him sometimes I worry. I was like, I'll never be ashamed of my family, because to say that is that I'm ashamed of myself,
Hmm.
because I come from that. But
Hmm.
I was like, I'm also being very mindful of how fast I'm growing, and people recognizing. And I don't necessarily think that I'm famous. Maybe I'm hood famous, where like my hood values me, and that's enough for me, and I'm okay with that.
But I'm a
But
part of that hood, so.
and then I think about like what happens the moment, someone finds out that my brother said the N word.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then in the world that we live in and the scrutiny, and it's like, oh, I try to unpack that every time I'm with them. And I don't know if they're not listening to me because I'm their sibling. And that's sort of like, you always want to contradict your siblings because they think we know whatever it is, right? And so I only bring that up because I think now with my nephew, my job to cultivate that is to be my authentic self, because I may not have the ability to instill that in him. You know what I mean? Because of the way that he's being raised. But if I can do everything to ensure that I'm still a part of his life
Hmm.
while being my authentic self, I'm already making an impact and a change. And I
Yeah.
think that's a powerful and important. Like my little nephew is already, by default blessed because I am their toti.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
and so my job is to live my authentic self, to be there for my sister as my full authentic self. And I think the things that I'm learning so far is that being my authentic self and succeeding at being my authentic self has allowed my parents to be a little bit more open.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with my father once. There's this weird TikTok video that I posted. Girl, I don't know how to use TikTok. I've given up. I'm like,
I
that's
literally Googled, like, I was like, I literally Googled, how do you do the Pixar filter on TikTok today?
yeah, there's like things I don't understand and don't know how to do. I'm like, whatever. But there
We're
is a
being bad.
video of
We're being bad now.
of me dancing with the kawama on my head.
Mhm.
And my dad asked me once, ¿Te tomaste la caguama con la que estabas bailando? And I thought, he was trying to trigger something in me that I either denied it, because what I knew by him telling me this is that he knew that there was a TikTok and he's seen that I've danced in skirts. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, oh, I know where you're going with this. And I literally responded, I actually drink it. And it was really, really good. Like I did. I mean, it's true. You know what I mean? But it was in that moment that it was like, understand that your comments no longer do anything to me. Like I
Yeah.
am doing what I'm doing. I am being good at it. Like, I get to say that I have these little contracts or that I'm doing these projects and getting paid for it. Like, no, I'm doing what I'm doing, and the moment you ask me to show up and help in whatever way, I'm going to do it. And when you ask where I got that money from, being my authentic self. And I
Yeah.
think that to me is that, that dicho that says el que ríe de último ríe mejor.
Mhm.
Those are
Mhm.
my carcajadas that I have. It's my favorite. Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder, because I think a lot of us as parents get caught up in like the how, like what's the formula? What's like the ABC? What's the 1, 2, 3 that I have to follow like in order for this to happen? And I think a lot of us forget that it's just the embodiment. Like it's
Just the
just being.
embodiment.
It's just
It's just
being.
being. Yeah.
It's just and like for the 7 of you that are here live, it's just being the thing that you want to
Just
see in them.
it's just being. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so just perfect. Like that's such a perfect reminder. And I was like thinking about this time. I was sharing in one of the groups that we were running that my daughter is 9.5. She'll be 9.5 in August, and we were like talking about villains, and like I've always loved villains. Like as somebody who's very much in mental health, like I love all the villains movies right now, like Cruella and like Maleficent. I'm just like, I love that. I love it so much. And so the other day, my 3-year-old was like, Captain Hook is a doo-doo head. And then my 9.5-year-old, like I wasn't even in the room, but I was like over there. She's like, Captain Hook is just wounded. And I was like, yes, yes.
Wow.
And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. Like that's exactly. And I've never said like, if somebody says that, like you have to be defending Captain Hook or whatever, because it gets kind of in that like gaslighting territory too. Like, no, Captain Hook caused real harm, and like you have to talk about harm and how that's valid as well. But I was in that moment, I was just like, it's working, like something I'm doing is working. Where like if she hears me enough, if I'm actually embodying it, if I'm actually like saying, and my partner and I have these conversations all the time where I'm like, I don't believe, again, no, it's not either or, it's not neither nor, like it's not ni de aquí ni de allá, es los dos, it's both and so a lot of us have trouble because we live in such a black and white world. A lot of us have trouble accepting duality, and
Right.
everybody is living in that binary, and I feel like that is what is causing suffering, and that is what is causing us to not be able to accept every reality.
Yeah. Every reality. Oh man. Today I had a little bit of a moment too where someone that I used to date and we're no longer dating, we hadn't talked in about 7 months, and I think I texted them and I was like, I love you or whatever. Because I still love them. I do. I
Yeah.
still have a lot of love for them. I just love my art more and following this calling and whatever. And I was like, hey, listen, I would love to see you one last time before I go. And he was
Mhm.
like, where are you going? And I was like, I'm moving to Mexico City. And then he was like, cool, what if we meet at this spot? And I was like, perfect. I'm like, it's a perfect place to say goodbye. And I was like, oh bitch, oh goodbye. Oh, it was something about that it's like, just by saying what I feel, I really realize what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Because yo hablo mucho. I speak before I think, and so I'm now learning to just trust my little heart to say what it has to say, and then my mind catches up and deals with whatever situation or consequence that my heart puts me in. But I never want to deny my heart from being the thing that I lead with.
And what a beautiful example from like for every child in your life from here forward.
Yeah. And to also, right, create a space and encourage my nephew to always lead with his little heart, whatever it is. And I just hope that little heart doesn't cause harm, because then we got to deal with it.
All of us will cause harm.
That's true.
Minachi. You know Minachi. Minachi, I reference them a lot because when I did like we knew each other before they were doing their nonviolent or their decolonizing nonviolent communication workshops. Pero they were the first to say, if at some point, if you and I are in a relationship for long enough, one of us will cause each other harm.
Yeah.
Sin querer queriendo, it's like el chavo, it's like sin querer, pues sin querer queriendo, but it happened,
Yeah.
and so I think, but that goes back to that binaries conversation. It's like none of us are going to be 100% santos, like it's just not going to happen, and we can't expect it of each other either. That's harmful.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah, that's true. That's real. I hope the degree of his harm is not that bad.
Yeah,
That's the compromise.
it's that continuum. It's like, let's stay over here though.
Right. Yeah, like, okay,
Let's
this
not
kind
go
of
way over
don't
there.
yeah.
You want to get to like Captain Hook level where you're like trying to
Right.
shank this poor Peter Pan boy. Um anyway, so I'm gonna see if Carissa can come back in to join us.
I'm
Uh,
here.
we're inviting people to ask questions. We're in the last like 13 minutes of the conversation. So if you have any questions for Minalgona friend, come on in. What are you thinking about the conversation, Carissa?
I'm loving the conversation. I want to move to Mexico City too.
Let's go. Let's do it. Did you meet up with Kim Guerra?
I did meet up with Kim. Kim hooked up the open mic. And so Kim and Ana Sheila are definitely like community that I'm thinking about connecting with if I move. I might ask them if I could rent out a room in their place as I transition into finding my own thing. But it's something very, very real. I don't want to romanticize moving to Mexico too much either, because I don't want to be a transnational gentrifier. And so I'm being very mindful of what that looks like. And one of the conversations that we had, as questions come in, and I'll share this briefly, but I was talking there and sharing that I think we know, right, that racism and capitalism are interdependent of one another. And because of the history of this country, we lead the conversation with race, but class comes underneath it. So sometimes in the discourse, we don't know how to do or how to handle a poor white person.
Right.
And so in Mexico, the conversation is led with classism, but the racism is still underneath it. So one thing that clashes sometimes is the upper middle class brown person, which is what I will become. And so figuring that out has been interesting. I don't plan, like, if I can afford, if my rent budget here in the US is 1,400, because we know how rent is expensive. And if that means that I can afford like a 7-bedroom house in Mexico with that money, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not trying to be ambitious. I'm just going to go get my little self a 1-bedroom studio. And if I have all this money left over, then I'd rather invest it in the community by supporting local artists to work with as an artist. Like, I'm trying to leverage my own power while I'm there, and I don't know how that's going to look like, right? So I think that moving to Mexico is literally a true test to my ethics.
I cannot wait to see how this unfolds. I'm so excited.
We do have one question that came in the Q&A, and it's a little paragraph. She's like, I'm not sure if I formulated the question correctly, but what I am understanding is what they are asking is, how do you navigate being a toti, having more Latinx parenting-esque ideals and more of the decolonized nonviolent parenting ideals than their actual parents, or maybe than the parents, and not overstepping to the boundaries while being true to ourselves and our beliefs?
So the example that I can think of is with my sister, and my nephew. And my nephew throws tantrums now because he's about to be 2. and thinking about like spanking and what that looks like, and reprimanding, and especially at this time, I'm learning by just seeing my sister that as parents there is this natural fear so that the child doesn't harm themselves, because children don't necessarily know and how to filter in pain and what harm looks like, right? And so my sister and I have been finding really cool ways to have conversations. Also, homegirl, like, could have been, she works with kids. She's in and she works in education. She would have been a bomb ass, child counselor. If she wants to do that, then I will help her get there as well. Pero we've been having a lot of conversation of what does discipline look like when
Mhm.
it's to ensure the survival of the child versus when it's just projection of your frustration, because that's where the disciplining is coming from.
Mhm.
There is, I think, a healthy discipline that it's like, no, this is for your survival. Like, do not turn on the stove and put your hand in there. And if it means that I have to do a little this so you can get that conditioning, then I'm okay with that. But if you're doing it because you're projecting your frustration, it's not okay discipline. And
Mhm.
so really having that conversation with my sister has been really interesting. And we're on the same page, which is like, oh yes, sister, like we get to be sort of different and have a similar idea on parenting than our parents, who I think a lot of our own castigos and nalgadas came from projections of their frustrations.
Right.
And having this emotional intelligence now has been very helpful. And I think even emulating that onto my parents, because parenting never ends for parents. You know what I mean? So I think that there's now how I get to embody this ideal of what parenting looks like is by really being an adult and not stepping into a child in the presence of my mother.
Mhm.
Because it's like, you did your job and I'm here, like, after all the trauma, but I'm still here. You know what I mean? So when I'm talking to you, we can have like a child parent conversation, but we can also have two adults having a conversation, because
Yeah.
I've stepped into that. So I think, again, going back to me telling my parents, I'm like, I'm not asking you for permission, I
Mhm.
think was the biggest step I've ever taken in my life, because I said it with tanta certeza,
Mhm.
and letting them know that I'm old, like I'm not old, but like I'm older, like I'm an adult, like you're not telling me what to do, but
Yeah.
I'm still here and I still showed up. And we have 6 months. Like, this is the child telling you I'm gonna miss you, but the adult is telling you I'm leaving. So
Yeah.
it's going back to that, right? It's the duality, and we discover it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of those times, like just back to your example with the stove, like a lot of that is very instinctual. Like I remember one time my daughter ran out of the house. I didn't notice it. She was like about to cross the street. She was probably about 2.5. And I roared like a lion. I was like, and I startled her, like I scared her, And so I want to just like remind parents that a lot of those times where you are trying to protect the safety of your child, those are not the same. Like Richard's saying, like those are not the same as you projecting your own wounds onto them, or actually like consciously being like, I'm gonna hit you the way up it. Like if you do that, I'm gonna whack you, like that's very different than just like the safety issue. And so in the decolonized nonviolent parenting class, we talk about those different kinds of limits, and that's like a safety limit, right? That's a safety
Yeah.
limit. There's also cultural limits. There's also like family limits, and social limits, right? Like I'm not gonna go and like flip you off like on the freeway. Like that's not socially okay.
Yeah.
Right. So but we do have another question. Do you want to ask, Carissa?
Question is, I'm raising a son who wants to play with what may have been considered girl toys. The other day, mom said not to let him play with that because you know what could happen. Then I told her no matter what happens, I will love my son and accept him with all my heart. She brushed me off, dismissed me, saying, I am of the world and my poor kids. I am of the world, these are quoted. Is this something I should continue to do or should I let her say it? I honestly don't think staying silent is even an option for me.
I think one of the things that Leslie and I talked about, first of all, thank you. thank you for doing that, because already you're advocating for a spirit that we don't even know if it's there yet. You know what I mean? Like your child will let you know, or I think especially in this situation, if you're creating this space, like a lot of the times, parents will do like the woke thing and say, oh, they're a boy and they want to wear a skirt and they're gonna wear skirts, and like they're super woke for doing that. But a lot of the times skirts are not gendered, and clothing is not gendered. And so though your child may be playing with girls' toys now, they may grow up and be like, I'm actually straight, mom. Like that was just the moment, and that's okay too, right? And it's not, and there's nothing wrong with like, but I thought you were gonna be queer and I raised you in this way. That's okay. In the same way that queer bodies thought we were gonna be raised straight and we didn't turn out to be straight. I think it's a continuum for sure. But I just want to say thank you for creating that space, because it's not that something that a lot of us were raised with, right? I wasn't created with that space. And so already you're doing something to allow this queer spirit to flourish if it's there. And if it's not there, you've raised a son, a straight son, who may not even turn out to be homophobic, which already contributes to the life of other queer bodies, right? And,
Yes.
and I think also it's super important, like my job as a toti, it's to be an advocate, but not, yes, to advocate for my nephew, but also to advocate for the relationship my nephew and my sister have.
Mhm.
Because I've seen that relationship and I'm like, how do you love this person so much? Like, oh, she's so annoying. Like, how, what? And that's a child parent relationship that I'll never understand, but I know the sacredness of that relationship. So my job as a toti is to ensure that nothing gets in the way of that relationship. And so I've now learned that. But to what you're saying, I think advocating for your child is super important. The same way that your mom advocated for you in her way, in her right, you advocate for your child. And I think that's that duality that we're talking about, right? Like you
Mhm.
can be your mother's child, but also you are a mother to a child. And it's like, no, you don't get to have an opinion in how I raise my child.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that.
That's so perfect, because even though we know their intentions, right? Because that intention is the same intention. Like they want their child to be accepted by the world. They want the child to be, um, you know, safe, right?
Yeah.
Like ultimately it's about safety and just wanting
Yes.
this child to like have an easier life, right? And so the intentions, although the same, have different strategies, right? There's different strategies to meeting that intention. And so yes, this is why, like, we have the Ami Manera workshop, because this comes up especially in Latino families and Latinx families, where the Western psychology word would be like enmeshment, right? But like that's just collectivism. Like there's collectivism where like we feel like we can parent each other's children. And so setting those boundaries is very, very difficult. And you need support around them too, and you need support around being able to say, thank you for your opinion, and having that confidence of like knowing that what you're doing is not wrong. Right. And like checking yourself,
Mhm.
like, why am I this uncomfortable with my mom saying this? Where I could have just say, like, thank you for your opinion. Yeah, and not take that personally, right? And just be
See.
confident about your parenting. But that's really difficult. That's very difficult, especially when you live in intergenerational households where you're always
See.
getting that opinion, and it's very activating for us, for our inner niña, and so it's just a lot of inner work.
Absolutely. I wanted to say and share that, like, what I like to do, because I do live in an intergenerational home, is I just like to say and model that language out loud a lot of times, especially when big emotions come out. I just model, you're allowed to have feelings, and just lots of affirmations, because abuelitos can hear those. They
Mhm.
can hear me affirm, you're allowed to have this emotion. You can go to this room, you can play with that, or saying things out loud. Our toys don't have genders. Our toys, anyone can play with our toys, because then our kids model and say those things too. Anybody can play with these toys. And
Yeah.
then abuelitos are like, oh, yeah, you're right. Anybody can play with those toys. And they kind of tend to see and learn, but it takes lots of practice and lots of time and lots of inner work.
It also takes those of us with privilege to like push for those things to be seen like at an institutional and systemic level too. Like I remember working at a
Mhm.
nonprofit and like walking into, they were going to do like a toy distribution, and it was like, this is the girls table, this is the boys table, and like they had the children walking in, and there was like a little girl that was looking at like some cars or whatever, and the dad quickly was like, oh, no, 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 eso es para niños, like vente pa acá, and I was like, this is not even their issue, like this is the people that set this up,
Parents,
like
the
that's your
adults.
issue. I wasn't even blaming the parents. I was like, this is the director for like being okay with the fact that
Mm-hmm.
girls sex, like, hello, you're working with families, like, so Yeah, but I feel like, because I know that you're an MSW, Richard, and so like for us, we have to like be able to see how those things are reinforced at a systemic and institutional level too, and then
For
be
sure.
like, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you can't be supporting that, right? Because I think that if she would have looked at the truck and all the toys were interspersed, like it probably would have been okay,
Yeah.
you
Or
know?
just having a pile of toys and choose a toy.
That's what I mean. I'm just like, who
Yeah.
cares? Choose it. Just choose any toy,
See, 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 see.
you know? Pero okay, so I don't think that we have any other questions that, yes, Nancy, thank you, that have come in. So I think we're gonna close just to honor everybody's time.
Thank you everyone for being here. We do have one more guest next week. So we're really excited for that next
Technically
Friday
two,
evening.
a couple.
2 guests, a
Yeah.
couple, yes.
So Richard, I love you so much. I can't wait until we move to Mexico City together
I
in
love
6
you.
months.
Yes.
And
Part of
stay
the
with
year.
Kim, stay with Kim and Anna Shayla.
I'm
And
thinking
for those
about
of you that
I'm thinking about starting a podcast to document or to record whatever I'm processing, and it's gonna be called En Búsqueda de la Malinche.
escalofríos. All the escalofríos. That's amazing. Yes, please keep us
Grecia says here
and
for the
then-
podcast.
yes, and so when that is done, let us know so that we can let everybody in the newsletter
Sí,
know
sí,
that
sí.
that's launched. And ¿qué más iba a decir? I think that's it. I'm so, so happy that you're my friend. I'm so happy that we get to have
Thank
these
you.
conversations. I'm so grateful for you for taking the time.
Of
There's
course.
like a million other things that you could be doing, but you took the time to be in conversation with the community. So I'm really grateful. And this is going
Yes.
this is going to be placed in a vault. No, this is going to be placed and made available to everybody.
Who's registered, yes.
Yes, who has registered, and people can still register. So if you're still listening, please invite everybody to come and listen to this conversation still, and then the 2 conversations that we've had and next week's. And then registration is open for our DNVP class. So if you want, you can sign up for that now. What am I missing?
Yes, just that. So our Decolonized Nonviolent Parenting 6-week series is our core series. It starts at the end of July. Right now, there is early bird pricing available. So if you want early bird pricing, it's $100 off. It's a really good deal. And there are different payment plans. There's a couples ticket for couples. And that starts at the end of the month. So we'll put that in the email reminder, the early bird code.
It's open to totis too.
Oh.
Yes. The early bird code is decolonize, but it's in the emails as well. So if you want the early bird code, if you don't have it already and don't have it in an email, just send us a DM and we'll make sure we get that to you.
Everybody in here, I think, is already subscribed, so you'll be hearing about it. But thank you so much, Richard. I love you so much. I hope you have an amazing weekend.
Gracias.
And we'll be talking soon.
Yes.
Bye everyone.
Bye.